From roster locks to the bubble, let's take a look at a way too early 53-man projection for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2025.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Liscow. He's James Rapien. We are your hosts of Locked On Bengals, covering your Cincinnati Bengals here on Locked On Bengals since 2016. If you're looking for an everyday stop for everything Cincinnati Bengals, from stadium lease news that we just covered to contract drama, which we've had enough of this offseason, to training camp takeaways when training camp arrives in just a few weeks, well, you're in the right place. You can hit that subscribe button on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode of Locked On Bengals. And if you're looking to build those good listener habits that I've been talking about, if you've heard me say those words on this show before, you can also make Locked On Bengals your first listen. Today, James, we dive into a 53-man roster projection. I will be writing down hash marks as we go. I think you'll be writing down hash marks as we go to make sure we get to 53 players here. I've got 3 special teamers to start. I don't know who the long snapper is going to be. We can have that discussion later. But let's get started with the Cincinnati Bengals offense as we try to figure out where those roster battles will be, because there are obviously roster locks all over the place here, James, and there are guys that we have questions about, and there are going to be questions about how many of what position groups do they carry. But we can start with quarterback, get the easy ones out of the way here, right?
Easy. I just want to know if Peyton Thorne's going to beat out Joe Burrow. I mean, you could save a lot of money. Okay. All right. The bit ended. The bit didn't even get a smirk out of Jake for those listening.
That's one of those. It's one of those bits that, like, I've tried before too, and in your head you're like, yeah, this is a good bit, and then you get into the bit and it's like, no,
it would have been fine. Peyton Thorne beats out Joe Burrow for the starting job. No,
you know where Peyton Thorne played his college football?
Northwestern. I don't think
Auburn.
That. Oh, okay. I just assumed it was your college. No, I didn't. You know why? Because he's not making the team.
Yeah.
And so Peyton Thorne, the reason I mentioned him is I bet there are a lot of daily listeners, our everydayers, that had no idea who he was and who he is. And yet he signed and is battling Logan Woodside, I would say, for the practice squad job, but is probably a really, really long shot for that. That being said, Joe Burrow, Jake Browning, locks. Logan Woodside, probably bound for the practice squad. And that would make a lot of sense, but there you go. That clears up quarterback right away. So you can go put 2 little hash marks at QB. Let's go from the most important position to the second most important position, running back. And because quarterback's most important, analytics people definitely say running back is the second most important position in football.
Yep. Better bit than your Peyton Thorne bit, for sure.
People are certainly believing that. How do you think this shakes out? Because there is a dilemma here. It's why there's a reason I brought it up, is I think there'll be at least a minute here on this. Chase Brown, lock. Samaje Perine, lock. Taj Brooks, probably a lock.
I think so.
Okay, so what if Zach Moss is healthy? They've given him guaranteed money now. How do you view the running back room?
I think 4. I think they keep 4 running backs if Zach Moss is going to be healthy. We don't know if Zach Moss is going to be healthy. So this could be a pup situation for Zach Moss, physically unable to perform. He doesn't start the season on the roster. Could be an IR situation for Zach Moss. We really don't know where he is. Do you have any idea as to whether he thinks he'll be ready? Have you seen him at all? Did you see him throughout the offseason program?
Yeah, he worked on the side. He was doing some rehab stuff. Okay. And I didn't have the opportunity to talk to him. He was never in there when I was in there, at least, or that I noticed. It honestly, it's wild during the offseason program because it's 90 and you're trying to get new faces. And the Bengals did this, which is, it kept me on my toes all offseason program. They switched where guys are. So the offensive line is where the defensive line used to be. And the defensive line is where the offensive line used to be. And it just, I'm looking like, all right, well, I'm trying to get my bearings still a little bit. So that that makes it a little bit more challenging. And the fact that the new locker room exists, and I'm still like half used to that.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. But no, I did not interact with Zach.
So,
I hope he's healthy enough to compete for a spot, because I agree with you. If he's healthy, I think he makes the team.
so here's what I've got for now. We'll come back to this one. Is I've got it at 5 offensive players, for sure 3 running backs, and I'm writing Zach Moss's name on the side for now. I think the situation is questionable enough that that's one that we'll come back to. But I think P. Ryan, they think is for sure on the team, no doubt about it. And I think that makes sense. And then Taj Brooks, I think there are pretty high expectations for. I think this is a 6th-round pick, a day 3 running back that they really like, that they feel like in other drafts would have gone earlier. And they're going to really like the way he approaches the game. Obviously, things can change. This is called way too early for a reason. But let's say 3 running backs there. Let's go to your favorite position here next, James. Offensive tackle. Wide receiver. Everybody knows that James loves wide receivers. We have, I would say, 4 locks at receiver, and I think they're going to keep 6.
Okay.
That's where I'm at right now. Maybe 7, but I don't think 7 this year. I don't think anybody on this roster is screaming, I'm going to be necessary for you to keep 7 wide receivers right now. That could change, of course, over the course of training camp, but Jamar, T, Andre, and I think Burton are locks right now. I think Charlie is very likely at this point. And then I think Isaiah Williams, from a specialist perspective and wide receiver 6 perspective, is probably the 6th guy. What do you think about wide receiver? Do you think there's a case for them to keep 7?
I don't think so. I'm looking here. So Jamar, T, Andre, Jermaine, Charlie, Isaiah. And so that would mean either Kendrick Pryor or Mitchell Tinsley or Cole Burgess or Jordan Moore. And that's an interesting one. Jordan Moore is interesting. Rashad Owens, another interesting one. Jamoy Mays doesn't really have a chance to make the team, or a realistic shot to make the team. Yeah, I think it's 6. I don't really see, because you don't have what you had in years past when they did this is you had the young receiver, plus you had a Trent Irwin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't have old reliable anymore, right? Where it's a guy that he's too good to cut, but he's not necessarily good enough to start and play regularly. And that's what Trent Irwin really was. He made some big plays for the Bengals. But I look at this, and yeah, I mean, Isaiah Williams and Charlie Jones, you're really hoping they run away with it. But if they don't, let's say Charlie Jones just laps Isaiah Williams as a special teamer. I don't think he will. I think Isaiah Williams is really interesting. It's going to come down to him on special teams and how well he picks up the offense after joining the team late last year. Moore and Owens are the 2 that I would be looking at from a receiver standpoint. Like, all right, is number 14 going to be in the mix? That's Jordan Moore. Or number 12 going to be in the mix? Rashad Owens. Those are the 2 that could push for a spot and beat out Isaiah Williams. But to your point, or Charlie Jones, Charlie's got to stay healthy. I think today it's 6, and it's those 6, and it's up to Owens and Moore to almost beat those guys out, not necessarily earn that 7th spot.
And I think you're talking about a slot contributor. I don't think that there's a true slot on this team right now, like the Tyler Boyd type of slot where they're the crafty route runners who are going to be very trustworthy 3rd down targets. And wide receiver, I think Mike Gesicki is going to do that role to some degree in this offense. And we'll talk about tight ends, obviously, as well, and how many tight ends we expect them to keep. But let's write down here. We got the 2 quarterbacks. We got 3 running backs. We got a question on Zach Moss. We got 6 receivers. So we're at 11 players on offense. We got to talk about the trenches. We got to talk about tight end. So we'll continue. We'll wrap up the offense here. We'll get to the defensive side of the ball coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be easier. Whether you're growing your savings, planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. Was there a specific category, for example, like takeout or subscriptions that added up to more than you expected? That is something that, to me, is really interesting. You monitor DoorDash, and especially especially in season, Jake. I'm a big DoorDasher because it works when you're on the road or here. And so that's something that pops up when you use Monarch Money and you can track it. You can say, I need to relax with that. Or I have too many subscriptions for TV stations or TV apps that I'm not necessarily using all the time. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Let's try to stay on one of the more straightforward conversations before we get into the offensive line, which I think wraps up the offense. But let's go tight end next, where Mike Gesicki, Drew Sample, and one of the Tanners, Tanner Hudson, Tanner McLaughlin, and Cam Grandy are the four that I'm thinking about right now. And I do think it's at 4 tight ends. What are your thoughts on the tight end position?
Yeah, tight end is interesting because you look at it and Gesicki lock, Sample lock, Hudson, McLaughlin, Grandy. I think 2 of the 3 make it. I think Cam Grandy has shown that he can do something that you're not going to get out of Tanner, that you're not either Tanner, which is block. So I think he's tight end 3, as weird as that sounds for some people. And then it's really going to be an uphill climb for Tanner McLaughlin because he's got to prove that he's the better Tanner. And that he can be essentially Mike Gesicki's backup if anything were to happen. Like we know Cam Grandy can do some of the Drew Sample stuff. Who can be the slot receiver-ish tight end if Mike Gesicki's nicked up? And so that's what Tanner McLaughlin's got to do, unless he's just way better at blocking this year too, and takes a step there and is more complete as a player. I would bet that it would be Tanner Hudson and Cam Grandy as the backups to Mike Gesicki and Drew Sample. And get used to it, though. You're going to see those 2 guys, Mike Gesicki and Drew Sample, a ton. I think they will play significantly more snaps than the other 2 guys if all 4 make it.
But I do think that the Bengals, even last year, showed that they have roles for Hudson and Grandy, which is why those 2 are the leaders at this point on June, 29th, 30th, whenever you're listening to this, end of June. But we're in agreement on 4 tight ends because there's such disparate skill sets in these tight ends. They don't have the all-rounder, largely because Eric All isn't present. Maybe if Eric All is healthy, maybe they talk themselves into 3, but I think 4 tight ends here is pretty straightforward, even though you're talking about some later picks and street free agents, college free agents at the back of the roster.
Yeah, I think I don't know how you get to 5. And I look at it and it really it's they didn't add to it for a reason. I mean, I think they feel really good about it. Now, who knows? Maybe I'm disrespecting Cole Taylor. Maybe I am. Maybe Cole Taylor makes a push, but I think this one's pretty straightforward. And the last thing here on tight end, it's such a bummer that 83 is going to miss the season. And he took a headshot. He had to take a headshot this year, but unfortunately not going to be on the field. But Eric All, this room feels so much more complete if Eric All is healthy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately he's not. Doesn't mean it's a bad tight end room. It's just, like you said, they all have kind of their individual roles that complement each other well.
Yeah. By headshot, James means a photo.
Picture.
For
team
photos.
For Madden.
The offensive line
on Madden, which I will be doing.
The offensive line has either 9 or 10 spots here. And this is where the Moss thing gets interesting. So obviously Orlando Brown, Amarius Mims, Ted Karras, Dylan Fairchild, Lucas Patrick, Jalen Rivers, Cody Ford. You're up to 7. And then are there 3 more? Matt Lee, Cordell Volson, Devin Cochran, Jackson Kirkland, Seth McLaughlin, who I think thinks he's going to be ready for training camp. We'll see. We'll see how they ramp him up. And Tashawn Manning, Andrew Stuber. Do you think they go 10 here? We've seen them go 10 in the past. But once you get past 9, you're talking Jackson Kirkland. Like it kind of comes down to, does Jackson Kirkland make the original 53? If you think they're going to go 10. Or does somebody else step up in a way that we don't anticipate? And that would be like the Seth McLaughlins or Devin Cochrans. Do one of those guys take a big step and really challenge for the 53? Because I think you got 8 pretty comfortably and probably 9. But then it gets a little bit iffy.
Yeah, it does. So you have the probable starters, I would say, Mims, Patrick, Karras, Fairchild, Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Rivers, I think, is going to make the team. Volson, I think, probably makes the team, and Lee and Cody Ford. So
And Cody Ford.
there's your 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It can. So I think it's going to come down to Seth McLaughlin. Can he? McLaughlin, excuse me. I'm thinking Tanner McLaughlin and saying that. But McLaughlin, if he can be healthy, like you said, or that. What's so
Kirkland.
interesting about Jackson Kirkland, if you talk to people, they're like, man, he's got something to him, but he's had so many injuries now, and he's been nicked up, and you wonder if those have taken a toll. Like he's really been nicked up for the better part of 2 years. So even if you flash that potential, it's tough. And Caleb Etienne's another one that maybe he surprises, but yeah, it's probably 9, barring something unforeseen.
ETN seems destined for developmental practice squad role. And I hope he lands there because he's got immense size. And hopefully he's a guy that could be developed into a swing tackle long term. Kirkland missed the rest of the season after suffering a biceps injury in week 5 last year. So significant injury there. Didn't he have an ACL before that? Did he not have an ACL? Am I thinking of a different player? He's missed time with like big injuries so far in his 2-year NFL career, and was seen as a day 2 prospect before injuries really started to slow him down at the end of his college career as well. But from a makeup perspective, you're right. Everyone in the building loves the way he approaches the game, approaches preparation. Offensive line experts love the way he maximizes his tools, but the athletic toolkit is limited there. So what I did, James, is I got 24 on offense right now, with potentially the 25th guy being Kirkland, Moss, and McLaughlin, the Ohio State center college free agent, one of the top college free agents in the Bengals college free agent class. So could be 25, but let's get through the defense and see how many open roster spots we have, because I think the defense is a lot more variable, and we can knock one out. I think safety is straightforward. Geno Stone, Jordan Battle, Dejon Anthony, Tyson Anderson. And I think it's those 4 guys. Unless they bring somebody in, it's those 4 guys, right?
Yeah, I don't know who else it would be. You're right. I mean, it is even more cut and dry than tight end from that standpoint. Is you have your 2 guys that are going to start, Battle and Stone, and then 2 guys in Tyson and Dejon that are going to be active probably and play a special teams role. But that's it. Yeah, PJ Jules, Jalen Key, Shaquan Loyal, like those guys are practice squad at best, and that's what they're battling for. So yes, 4 safeties. And then corner.
Well, I think the rest of the defense is just complicated. So I think we'll finish the show by getting through the rest of the defense and figuring out if we have that 25th player on the offensive side of the ball, James, because we might end up having to keep 26 guys on this defense to feel comfortable about where things are going. So let's get to corner. We'll do that and finish the defense here coming up next.
All right, let's get to corner, Jake. And you look at it, Cam Taylor-Britt, obviously lock. Dax Hill, lock. DJ Turner, lock. Josh Newton, lock. And then it's like, all right, well, DJ Ivey, I think they like him a lot. He's probably there. Marco Wilson, that's when you start to get into it. Jalen Davis is obviously someone they hold in high regard. So I think the first, Hill, assuming health, Cam Taylor-Britt, DJ Turner, Josh Newton, all locks. DJ Ivey probably close, but I don't know. Marco Wilson, I think they like, but we'll see. How do you view the corners after those first 4?
Well, I think they're keeping at least 5. And then the question is, do Marco Wilson and or DJ Ivey do enough to make them feel like they have to keep 6? That's where it is now. Last year they kept 5. They had those 4 guys that we're talking about as locks this year, plus Mike Hilton. This year it's those 4 guys, and then one of Ivey or Wilson, probably Wilson would be my intuition here at the end of June, but that's a true training camp battle, I think, the back of this corner room. Jalen Davis got to the practice squad last year. I think he still has practice squad eligibility. I mean, either way, I guess he would. He could be a veteran practice squatter. The Bengals have every NFL team is allowed to have veterans on the practice squad. So I think you're at 5 for sure. And then it's, do we think that Wilson or Ivy, one of those two guys, does enough to make them keep 6.
Yeah, I wonder about Wilson, because I know there are people in the building that like him, and he joined mid year, and yet you think back to Ivy as a rookie, and I remember veterans telling me like, "Oh, that dude can be a dude." When he was a rookie, and he started to make a few plays, and then obviously gets hurt and comes back last year, and so I would give Ivy the edge, but I think that's an interesting battle. The one thing is certain, just based on their lack of moves at corner, they feel good about this room. And I think it's because of guys like Ivy and Wilson, and even a guy like Jalen Davis, who I think they are confident in. The belief in those guys allowed them to stand pat in their mind. And so, do they keep 6? Is it 5 with multiple guys on the practice squad that they believe in? I think Marco Wilson and DJ Ivy and maybe Jalen Davis will be in the mix there.
Yeah. So for now, I've got 5. I wrote down some names here. I'll add Davis's name to the list because I think this is going to happen at multiple defensive positions where we're going to talk through a couple of guys and then we'll be like, well, what about this one more guy? So let's go linebacker next. This one, just trying to go from simplest to complex, and maybe that's the opposite order we should be doing this. But Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter, the rookies are going to be on the team along with Logan Wilson. Oren Burks, I think, all but certainly is on the team. He's going to be seen as an ace special teamer if all things go according to plan. He is a versatile backup linebacker who has shown that he can play when he's on the field on defense. Was great in Philly's playoff run. And then I think Mumajong Meta is probably the 5th guy, but with the return of Al Golden, I wonder if that shakes things up a little bit. Muma and Shaka Hayward are the 2 guys. And I think it's probably 5 linebackers. Do you have strong thoughts on whether they go 6 on the initial 53?
This is an interesting one because you have Logan Wilson, who's going to lead the show, Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, lock, Oren Burks, lock. And then after that, it's really, really up in the air where like Muma's the fan favorite. I think Shaka Hayward showed something. And then you got Craig Young and Joe Giles Harris. And are either of those guys even going to be in the mix for a spot? Probably not. So I would say 5.
Mm-hmm.
And that Hayward versus Jong Meta battle is interesting to me because I think Hayward showed something. I know everyone remembers Muma in his preseason last year, and I think he's in the mix and maybe favored. But I think those are probably the 6. Maybe you end up with one more on the practice squad as well. The 6 linebackers that you want inside your franchise. You probably go with 5, but the 6 that you're going to have on your practice squad, and maybe the 7th is somewhere else, or maybe he is on the roster. But I think they end up going with 5, and it'll come down to Muma or Shaka.
The end of the year last year, Shaka Hayward played 7 snaps in their Week 18 game against Pittsburgh. He played 5 snaps on defense before that in Week 15 and Week 16 against Tennessee and against Cleveland. Mumajong Meta from Week 9 through Week 18 was getting some sub-package play. So if you went based on last year, Muma did out-snap Shaka Hayward, but it was like a 31-12 advantage. We're not talking about a large amount of snaps here. I would personally lean Muma for those reasons primarily. But like I said, with the new defensive staff, new linebackers coach, new defensive coordinator, does last year matter all that much when it comes to that battle? I think that's a real battle. So I think we're at 5 linebackers. And then if those guys are both awesome, maybe there's a way they keep 6. Last year they kept 5. I would be surprised to see 6 linebackers. Last year we were talking about, do they only keep 4 linebackers? And they went with 5. The defensive line, though, is going to be a crowded room. And I think that this is where things get particularly spicy on defense. Because assuming Trey is on the team, your edge room consists of Trey Hendrickson, Joseph Osai, Shamar Stewart, Miles Murphy, Cam Sample, all to me as locks right now. And I think Cedric Johnson is favored to make the team. I would say more likely than not to make the team. And part of the reason for that is that there's only 4 interior defensive guys that you feel good about making the team right now. And then the question is, do one of Howard Cross or Eric Gregory, the 2 relatively marquee college free agents on the defensive side of the ball, do enough to be the fifth interior guy that then makes the Bengals consider, hey, do we keep 11 total in the trenches? Do we still keep our 6 edge guys and go with 5 interior guys? That gets us to 25 players on defense. And that would mean that they're only keeping 5 corners at that point. Or do they opt for the 6th corner and go lighter in the defensive line? Because last year, their initial 53, they had 10 defensive linemen.
Mm-hmm.
They kept the extra safety last year. They had 5 safeties last year, and that was the extra player on defense.
Yeah, that's the Von Bell spot. I know it wasn't Von. I mean, he was starting, but the difference between last year's room and this year's room, obviously Dejan made the team. I think as of today, I think they just keep 4.
You think 10 defensive linemen, 6
4
edge guys, 4 defensive tackles.
4 defensive tackles. The 6 edge guys are locks, right? I mean, Osai, Shamar, Cam Sample, Trey, Miles, Cedric. Lock.
You think Cedric is locked?
Locked.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't feel that strongly about it. That's interesting.
Yeah. No, he's
I thought favored like 80%, but I didn't feel 100%.
I mean, unless he just shows up to camp 20 pounds heavier than he was 2 weeks ago, and just out of shape and but other than that, yeah, I think they really like him and they think he has potential. And so you're not going to throw that out the door when heck, he got a lot of valuable snaps in the offseason program and there's belief they saw him. So no, I think they're locks. And so what that means is if you're Howard Gregory or Howard Cross or Eric Gregory, you need to not just prove to be the 11th guy, but you need to show enough to where maybe they risk exposing Cedric Johnson to waivers. Maybe they risk going that route and enforce their hand a little bit.
I would say right now. So right now we're at 51 with the bubble guys. We got 24 on offense. We got 24 on defense. We got 3 special teamers, and the guys that are in the air are those 2 defensive tackles, Howard Cross, Eric Gregory. And we've got questions for one of potentially Marco Wilson, DJ Ivy, Jalen Davis. So like one of those corners if they wanted to keep a 6th corner. We've got Shaka Hayward or Muma Jongmeta if they wanted to keep a 6th linebacker. So there's a bunch of guys on defense they could go to get to 25. Or if they wanted 2 of those guys, then you could say 24 on offense if, say, Zach Moss is on a list to start the year and say they don't feel like McLaughlin or Kirkland are 53 worthy. So those are the guys we're considering for 2 spots now. The way that we've boiled it down is Jackson Kirkland and Seth McLaughlin as offensive linemen. We don't know the status of Zach Moss. So that's 3 on offense. And then on defense, the 2 defensive tackles, the 3 corners, and 1 linebacker for 2 spots. And that's interesting.
It is interesting because I think a lot of people are going to say, all right, keep the defensive tackle. And so when you put it that way, it's like, all right, Mr. Cross, shine bright, make a difference and show that you belong. Obviously you played for Al Golden. You're familiar with things, show that you matter. And we'll see. He's certainly someone that could be in the mix. Both guys, Gregory and Cross, aren't young, 23 and 24. You would hope that they would be able to potentially contribute and earn a spot. And so that it's good to do this exercise for that reason, because sometimes it isn't all right, defensive tackle versus defensive tackle. It really is Muma versus Gregory versus Cross versus Shaka. And sometimes it's across it. Like you said, it's, well, we can maybe put Zach Moss on this list or and risk losing this guy, or we can go this route and so those are the dilemmas and the conversations that they have going into that cut down and into that final week of the preseason. So the big takeaway here is the roster is pretty close to set. And obviously there'll be injuries and information is going to change. But a lot of this, if it's just chalk, I think we're pretty close with the 51. I think barring something unforeseen, this could, in an ideal world, be what the Bengals are envisioning for their 2025 roster coming out of the preseason and going into the regular season.
And the one thing that I'm thinking again as we go through this is, man, they could sign a safety and it would help. Man, they could sign a guard and it would help. Those thorns in our side that have been there for this entire offseason are still there. even as we go through this exercise, because I think they make some of these decisions easier or make you feel better about some of the spots on your team at least. And that's where we're going to be. But I do think that the other takeaway here is, like you said, there's some very interesting battles at the back end of this roster throughout training camp, but there will be surprises too. There will also be injuries that change the math here on certain spots, but the surprises are always interesting. Somebody is going to emerge at this training camp. It almost always happens that we're not anticipating today in June. And that's part of the interesting thing about this too, is to look back on this in a month and a half and see who has really popped throughout the training camp and preseason process. But that's it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Let us know who you think is making the team that we aren't considering strongly enough in the comments, or track us down on socials. Yell at us there if that's your thing. Until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.